You said last month our over-the-horizon capacity can work and has worked in going after ISIS targets and killing people who went after our troops, but you guys didn't kill people who went after our troops. You killed 10 civilians, including 7 children. So does the president still think these over-the-horizon strikes can work?
Absolutely, and I will just reiterate, as our Secretary of Defense conveyed, as General McKenzie conveyed, that there was a serious mistake. The Secretary of Defense has authorized, as I noted before, a thorough review of the investigation just completed by U.S. Central Command, including the degree to which the investigation considered all available context and information, the degree to which accountability measures need to be taken, at which level, and the degree to which strike authorities' procedures and processes need to be altered in the future. That's an important process. I would note, which I noted earlier, that there's a difference between a self-defense strike, which is exactly what this was, and I would note there was one prior to this that was a successful self-defense strike, and those that is posing an imminent threat to U.S. forces, who were, as we all know, on the ground at that time, facing real threats in real time, and an over-the-horizon strike, where we typically expect to have more time to assess both the threat and the potential target. That is a different approach, and it requires a different approach, and is a different approach internally, and General McKenzie spoke to that last week as well.
Some of the victims' relatives are saying that they want to be relocated here. Is that something that the administration is going to help them do?
I'm not aware of that request or that ask. I'm happy to certainly speak to our national security team and see what that process will look like.
Following up on the drone strike last week that the Pentagon now admits was a tragic mistake. What was the president's response when he learned about that?
Well, the president was briefed on Friday morning about the report that was going to be released and put out. I would say first, the president's view and all of our view is that the loss of any civilian life is a tragedy, as was made clear in the comments by the Secretary of Defense, by General McKenzie. This was done in error, and clearly the investigation that will continue is something the president broadly supports. So, as a human being, as a president, as somebody who has overseen loss in a variety of scenarios, both as a leader and personally, his reaction is it's a tragedy, and every loss is a tragedy, and he supports the effort to move this forward as quickly as possible and to have a thorough investigation.
You mentioned there's an ongoing investigation. Should it be anticipated that someone would be fired, demoted, not promoted, passed over, and held accountable within the military ranks for this?
I think what's important is that the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman and General McKenzie came forward and made very clear that this was they wanted to see this move forward quickly. They wanted to be as transparent as possible. They wanted to learn from what had happened. It's also important to note what the circumstances were here in when this strike was made. This was a scenario where there were direct threats from ISIS-K against our troops who were on the ground in Afghanistan, and that was the scenario where the strike was made. Obviously, it was done in error, and obviously there was a horrific tragedy that happened, but I'm not going to predict what the impact will be.
Two more quick ones. One more on Afghanistan. Back on August 26th, the president said, "I've also ordered my commanders to develop operational plans to strike ISIS-K assets, leadership, and facilities. We will respond with force and precision at our time, at the place we choose, and the moment of our choosing." Should we still be anticipating that there will be military response to what happened there in Kabul?
Against ISIS-K? Yes, I think it's important. This is a good question that's been asked. I think this is a version of what you're asking, but others have asked me this. There's a difference between a self-defense strike based on an imminent threat to U.S. forces. That's why I referenced that, who were obviously on the ground, and these were threats, as you all lived through and covered, and as we communicated about in the moment. And an over-the-horizon strike, where we typically expect to have more time to assess both the threat and the potential target. That is a point General McKenzie made, an important point, I think, for people to understand as we assess over-the-horizon threats and targets moving forward in the future.
So yes, at some point there may be something.
Well, I would say, of course, the president's desire to continue to go after ISIS-K has not changed. Okay.